This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 2, Episode 64 of the Jumble Think Podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumble Think Podcast, where we interview leading entrepreneurs about how they took their dreams and ideas and turned them into reality. Along the way, they'll give you tips of how you can turn your dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's episode is MC Miller. More about MC in a moment. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hey there, welcome to the Jumble Think Podcast. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have an incredible episode lined up for you today. Before we dive into that, I want to encourage you, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, head on over there right now and click that subscribe button. If you like listening to your podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, all you have to do is go to jumblethink.com/iTunes. And if you like listening on Spotify, jumblethink.com/Spotify. Both of those links will take you right to the app where you can subscribe to the Jumble Think Podcast. Now let's learn a little bit more about today's guest, MC Miller. Our guest today is MC Miller. He is the founder and CEO of Opportunity in China, and also a podcaster with a podcast also called Opportunity in China. It is such a privilege to have him on. He's a specialist in international higher education, cooperation development, and student faculty recruiting across borders. MC, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Michael, for letting me on.
Now, what you do is hyper specialized. You help people who are looking for careers find schools that need them to teach in Asia. You also help students get positioned in the U.S. How in the world do you get into that kind of career?
Well, for me, it started in about 2012. So I was getting ready to graduate from university, and I was thinking about going to law school, and then I was thinking about not going to law school. I took the LSAT, did the applications, got into some schools I wanted to go to, but then just had kind of a quarter life crisis and realized that, yeah, I could go to law school and eventually do M&A, maybe in East Asia, which was what my original intention. Or I could do something a little bit more organic, something a bit more interesting, or something I have more control over. Regardless, I instead of going to law school, I went to China. I worked in the hospitality industry, recruiting mid-level management, marketers, salespeople for a domestic chain, trying to help them understand their foreign clients and to develop their ability to attract foreign clients. And that didn't really work out too much due to some visa issues. And so I wanted to stay in China. So I finished up my first year and a half in China by teaching English. It was the low-hanging fruit. And at first I really knew nothing about it. And then I found I was very fortunate. I was in Beijing, even though my job made me travel everywhere. And most of my students, if you will, they were my peers, actually. I was in my mid-20s, and they were all college graduates. Virtually all of them were college graduates. So it was such a rewarding experience, and I learned a lot. And then I came back to America, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I realized, well, education's a big market, and I understand the education system pretty well. I was a good student myself, and so I was involved at the university, met a lot of people. And so I just started reaching out to people I knew, and I began a student recruiting organization and helping Chinese students come to America, study at our institutions of higher learning. And then I found that, some of the schools that we were pulling the students from to come to America, well, they needed foreign teachers because obviously the Chinese students need to be able to speak English in order to, do well in school and even pass the examinations required to get here. And so, that's one thing led to another. And then economies of scale, I figured, well, if I'm going to be recruiting for these handful of schools, which I'm partnered with, it takes a lot of work. So I might as well build up the company. And now this year alone, we're helping about 150 people go to China.
Wow. You specialize in China specifically, but you're also serving beyond China.
Yes.
We were talking before in the last couple of days as we were prepping for this interview, just about the challenges of our current political climate and how that's shifting what you're doing on the broader scale and giving you a new vision. It sounds like throughout your career and creating this company, you've been on a journey of reinventing yourself, reinventing not necessarily what you do, but how you do it to serve the right people at the right time.
Absolutely. Well, we know that higher education in America, at least, but also elsewhere, is getting more and more expensive.
Yeah.
It really requires a full household income to send somebody to even like a tier 2 institution here in America. And so a lot of people are graduating with humanities degrees. They don't have the most robust job prospects. And to some extent, that was me if I didn't go to law school, you know. And so I recognized that, wow, there's this great need. And let's face it, you know, the People's Republic of China contains about 1/5 of the world's population. It's a huge market. It had, you know, the people there, their ancestors have contributed a lot to human civilization, and they're going to continue to do that, just like those of us in the West. And so it's really, really important to me, and I'm not sure why, but I really want to bridge the gap, so to speak. I know that sounds a bit cliche, but there's something very special about the organic process of you know, these two parts of human civilization coming together, as opposed to sort of what you just mentioned, the top down.
Right.
You know, whether it's diplomacy or lack thereof, or different motivations from one side of the Pacific to the other. What I'm doing is more organic. There are people who want to go, they want to meet people, they want to experience something on both sides of the Pacific. And so I'm contributing to that. And it really inspires me every day to help people internationalize themselves, prepare for the future global job market, which is getting more and more competitive, or so it seems. And so having skills, having cultural knowledge, and having a bigger and internationalized social network could be quite a powerful backdrop for the future of a person's career. And so, it's been a real pleasure to meet people who are looking for either a life transition, or they're just getting out of college and they're looking to spend some time outside of their previous environment. And I can help them go to China, and I can help, you know, Chinese, and we also work with some Vietnamese companies, come to America and broaden their horizons. Mm-hmm.
Super, super, super cool. You are doing this from experience because you've been on the ground in China and you've experienced that culture. You've experienced the people. You've worked with tons of people to help them in that transition, either going to China or coming from Asia to the US. In that process, there's a lot of learning that you've done. There's a lot of experience that you've had, both personally and through the people you're serving. There is this philosophy in the US, and I think I've been to Asia, to various parts of Asia, and I've been nothing but appreciative of the people of Asia. They're incredibly generous, incredibly kind, and I think we have a misconception of who they are, what they look like from the standpoint of how we interact, and we make it us against them. As Americans, how do we need to reinvent that understanding of a collaboration between cultures, between locations, and between peoples?
Okay, well, you just give me an opportunity to be very nerdy, so this is going to be fun. You're right. I have been all over Asia, mostly East Asia, and I've been to over 50 cities throughout China. I'm very familiar with the political geography, and I have friends all over the place, and I'm really grateful for them and their influence in my life. And one thing that I learned, both at university and just through my general studies, is that in international relations, there are basically three theoretical frameworks. I'm sure we are all familiar with realpolitik, also known as realism, right? The idea that states are vying for power against each other. They're balancing against one another. They're working with other states to bully up on another state. And some people believe this in part led to the wars in the 20th century. And then there's the liberalism conception, or the theoretical framework, that institutions that are created in the international community can help help nations get along, help them trade, help them come together to a broader understanding about their collective future, because this is one planet, so we all have to some extent a collective future. And then there's another point of view, which is constructivism, and this one's more appealing to me, and it is the idea that nations, and especially nation states and their political leadership, they're people. They're made up of people just like us,
Right.
and so they're not always rational. They're not always easy to understand. They're not just pawns and pieces on a chessboard who are trying to vie for power all the time. There are feelings, there are emotions, there's visions, there's goals. And I know one goal, for example, is, and that's quite bothersome for many people in the West, is that the People's Republic of China, specifically the government, they see themselves as, they want to be able to make an impact that's at least equal to their historical importance and the size of their economy and of their population. Again, I mentioned 1/5 of the world's population. They want to be represented at least in par with that reality. This totally makes sense. But there's also the fact that there's people there. It's not just one political unit that's acting, for its own self-interest. There's over 1 billion people there. They all have their own dreams. They all have their own visions. And so in the constructivist view, there's smaller levels of social interaction, many of which I'm involved in, right? I'm sending people to China. Americans are being able to demonstrate who they are, who they actually are, as opposed to what Hollywood or, television series have shown Chinese people that we are, which is obviously, I don't believe you and I live a Hollywood lifestyle, but to their mind,
that's for sure.
To their mind, they have those misconceptions. But sending people to China, letting them live there, interact with the population, this is really potentially a great thing, because then people can have better understanding. And with regard to the brunt of your question was, how do we have the better understanding of China? And again, one thing I like to tell people is to consider, if you live in a major city in the West, I'm quite sure over the last 10 years, you've seen more and more Chinese people, or even East Asians generally, in your communities.
Right. Yeah.
And they tend to be highly educated. They tend to be from well-to-do backgrounds, which means that unless you're working in some specific industries like farming, unless you're working in an industry that's not going to be touched by globalization and all the trends that are inherent in globalization, at some point, probably every year, maybe every quarter, you're going to have a client, you're going to have a customer, you're going to have a business partner, you're going to have a boss, you're going to have somebody who's important to you who's going to be Chinese. It's going to happen.
Such an important perspective on that. And I love, it goes back to that old saying, until you walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And on the bigger picture, when you go and experience other cultures, other people, and you become aware, you realize that we're a lot more alike than we are different. And while we might speak different languages or eat different foods, we're still human beings. We're still people, whether it's at the highest level or at the lowest level of civilization. Whether you're a president of a nation or you're an average Joe walking the streets, you are you have a lot more common with the global community than what we're led to believe.
Absolutely.
I think often.
Absolutely. That's the thing I felt every time I'm in China, especially now. Over the last few years, I've become very fluent in the local language. I really feel at home. And of course, there's some cities that are very different. Like, for example, when I lived in LA for a while, it's not really my speed. I didn't really enjoy the culture of LA that much. There were some places I really liked, but I was there for a while and I really longed to be back in the American Midwest. Okay. Just going to be honest.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so when I'm in China, I recognize that we're all the same. We're all people, especially if we don't have very specific roles, right? Just as individuals coming together, walking past one another on the street or greeting one another in exhibitions or conferences. Yeah, we all have the same goals. We have a family. We have friends. We want to advance ourselves without taking too many risks. We want to care about our careers. We want to see our children grow up, be educated, and do better than we did. That's it. Everyone has that goal. The American dream of having good career, good family, happy, stable, responsible, moral, like life. This is everyone's dream pretty much, besides those who live on the fringes, right? And so, yeah, it's something you definitely realize when you live abroad for an extended period of time. It's really enriching, it just makes you feel like you're doing the right thing because it seems to be the pattern of humanity.
Love that for sure. As we kind of wrap up this segment, we always ask the following 3 questions. The first one is, you're doing some really cool stuff, and what you do, the business you run, really does make a difference in people's lives, both from the people you're helping place, whether it's in a school as a teacher or as a student, but also the people that they interact with. It has a ripple effect. So how are you finding purpose in what you do?
Wow. Well, again, going back to the constructivism idea is that I am helping bridge the gap and making the world potentially a more prosperous and harmonious place. Now, that's a very nebulous idea. More concretely, I have impacted people's lives positively because, just to be honest, the industry I'm in, it's very challenging. It's full of many different types of actors, and I know that at least with my company, we do everything correctly, and we care about the livelihoods and the potential for success that our institutional partners and our clients have at the same time. And we have definitely seen, both in our reviews online and our conversations with people, that they are amazed by the experience they have, many of them. We have sent families to China. Just recently, I met a guy about 6 months ago. He called our number. He reached my extension, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm in Chicago too." Great. I'm like, "Well, we both met. We both met downtown at the Merchant Mall, and we had a chat over coffee for like 45 minutes." And to be honest, I thought to myself, "This guy's an attorney. He's an attorney, by the way. Why would he go to China? He has a family." I was like, "He's probably not going," but it was nice talking to him. Whatever. But he went. He arrived last week with his wife and 2 children. Why did they do that? They changed their life. They uprooted everything. They wanted their children to grow up and to be more globally minded. And they did that. It's awesome. I'm touching people's lives. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's incredible. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more in segment 2. You are really helping serve a lot of people, but you face your own challenges. What's one challenge you're currently working to overcome in your own business?
Well, probably delegation.
Okay.
So I know that's every entrepreneur's problem, right? So, we have all these cliches. Oh, I wear many hats. I wear all the hats, Michael. Right. I wear all of them. Of course, we have a small team, and I mostly lean on independent contractors because I want them to be motivated. I want to see that their motivation is what's driving them, not the salary I'm paying them. And so I have a small team, but it's really hard for me to delegate. I run everything. I run my podcast, but I'm also the top of the funnel with regard to several people in China who handle each individual market. But I'm the first person who talks to every candidate. I talked to over 1,000 candidates this year already. That's a lot of time. And considering that we recruit from America, Canada, UK, Ireland, South Africa, and people who are already living in East Asia, and of course, North America, I have work on all time zones. And so I need to delegate. It's a big challenge, and I'm slowly learning how to do that. Giving up a little bit of my power to other people.
Yeah, for sure. What is the next big goal you have for the business?
That's a good question. So we want to become more of a hub for information about China. Obviously, we perform a service. We help people get connected with schools and other institutions in China. But we want to make sure that we're not only providing the recruiting service, but we're providing a channel for information. That's part of the reason why I do the podcast. We want people to be able to do away with misconceptions or misinformation or outdated information. We want to bring more stories into the fold where people have had successes that can explain to people how they have successes. So one goal is to expand our just our informational content out into the web for people for their free consumption, so they can better prepare themselves if they choose to go to China. That's one big goal, definitely.
In a moment, we'll be back with MC Miller to go deeper into this conversation around education abroad and teaching abroad. Last week in Season 2, Episode 62, we talked about the Dreamer's Method to micro experiments. And now we have a free guide you can download from Jumblethink to walk you through the steps of using micro experiments to turn your dreams and ideas into reality. The guide is completely free. All you have to do is go to jumblethink.com/guide and you can download your free guide to the Dreamer's Method to micro experiments. So head on over and download your free guide. Now let's return to our conversation with MC Miller, the CEO and founder of Opportunity in China. We are back with MC Miller to go even deeper into this topic of Opportunity in China, what his company is doing, and his podcast. Now, before we dive into this segment, I want to make sure people know how they can find you, find your business, and also your podcast. So can you let us know how we can connect with you?
Well, if you want to connect directly, go to our website, opportunityinchina.com. There is both a contact email, which myself and my team all have access to, or you can call our 1-800 number if you're in North America. My extension is extension 1. Call me directly. If you have a question, I'm generally available, around the clock. So if you have any questions, hit me up on phone, email, or you can just follow our podcast. And that way you can become more acquainted with the topics. It's Opportunity in China podcast. It should be available wherever podcasts are streamed.
Very cool. It's a very fun episode. I was just listening to one of your interviews where you talked to a gentleman that's been living this and doing this and grew up in this. It's super fun to hear these stories. I know for me, I grew up around a community that this was part of the community. I went to college. My roommate went to China and taught English for several years, him and his wife. And my next door neighbor growing up, he went to China for a while and did this. I know other people have gone to Thailand and Cambodia and other places throughout Southeast Asia. People may be listening and they may be going, well, this sounds amazing to go teach somewhere else, to go pay off my student debts quickly. You mentioned that. What kind of people do this kind of thing where they go to Asia or even beyond Asia and they teach or they find a role in a business? What do those people look like?
Okay, well, obviously, expatriating to another country is a big decision.
Right.
So there is a number of types of people in the world who are unwilling to do that. But those people who want to have a try, they tend to be people who are fresh out of college. That's a large segment of the population.
Yeah.
Before they go to med school, law school, graduate school, before they start their career, they want to take a year or two off. They want to see the world. And so maybe they'll go teach in a couple different countries or usually English as a second language is a very low-hanging fruit. It's very easy to obtain a job and actually have good income. That's why people choose to do that. It's a way to slow travel. A lot of people in the industry call it slow traveling. So they go somewhere for a year, they go somewhere else for a year, and they go somewhere else for a year, all as an English teacher. So maybe it's Vietnam one year, China the next year, maybe Eastern Europe the next year. So a lot of it is just about experience. It's about traveling. It's about, expanding your horizons, expanding your social network. So the people with these types of motivations. Also, it's just for people who maybe they're stuck in the rat race. Maybe they have a pretty decent job. It pays 30, 40, 50,000 a year. But they don't have anything tying them down. Maybe they don't have a family, or maybe they do, but generally they don't have a family. They have no real obligations and they want to try something new. They want to try something exciting. And obviously, if you're going to be living in a different country, especially one as markedly different from at least the American context as is China, it's going to be very, very stimulating. You're going to be learning something new every day, even if you don't want to. You're going to be inundated with new information. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like in the case of the attorney that you were talking about, some people are doing it for the standpoint of widening the horizon of their children, that their children would experience other cultures. And I'm a fan of the HGTV show International House Hunters or House Hunters International. And that's one of the things you see a lot are families that want to give their families different experiences than just the American experience, or families who have an opportunity to go do something incredible and they become expats. But on a larger scale, there's kind of two pockets, it seems like. Those people who are doing it as a short-term, slow travel experience, whether it's just in one city for a year or a couple cities over a couple years. And then there's the second pocket of people who are doing it because this is the lifestyle they want. They do it for 10, 15, 20 years.
Right.
How do people navigate learning, one, is this right for them? And what does it look like for them to really go and start that experience and create that lifestyle?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. You need to be prepared, but also you just need to dive in. You need to actually try it before you can really know. We deal with many candidates who they'll talk to us for several months to a year before they finally pull the proverbial trigger and go. It's all up to the person's, sense of risk or whatever obligations they have in their home country. But I think what's important is that you make sure that if you are going to go to a different country like China, or if you're going to go to Vietnam, or if you're going to go to Latin America, just make sure that you feel you feel a connection, right? You feel an interest, because some people go just because they're financially motivated solely. And that's fine, especially for a 1 year thing or 2 year thing. But those individuals you mentioned who are there for half a decade, for a full decade or more. Yeah. And it sounds like you probably know a few of them, right? You mentioned that already. And they do it because they like the culture. They like the food. They like the temperament of the people. And it's comfortable for them. And of course, they have a good lifestyle. When the moment they enter China, for example, they're immediately upper middle class, immediately.
Wow.
Yeah, with some exceptions. If you're in downtown Shanghai, you're going to be more like typical middle class.
Right.
But generally speaking, the majority of people, they're immediately upper middle class. You're immediately earning the same wages as doctors, as an English teacher, immediately. And so it's a great way to have a comfortable life. I know many people too, they go to China because they have other things going on. Maybe they operate an location independent business, right? Maybe they're a podcaster.
Yeah.
Maybe they're doing some drop shipping company, or maybe they're a writer. Maybe I met so many people who, when I'm talking to them on the phone about their goals and their ideas, they have a bigger idea than just China. It's a stepping stone for them. Maybe they want to write a novel, or maybe they want to get their master's degree online, but they need a very cheap place to live because living, they want something where they can actually earn money, they can pay it off. Or maybe they have, like I mentioned, they have this student debt. They want to be debt free because they have X, Y, and Z goal. But then once they get out there, then there's the people, like, once they get there, once they dive in, they recognize that, going back to what we talked about earlier, people are the same wherever you go,
right.
At the fundamental level. And so they don't really feel any major issues with staying. And then they develop friendships. They develop maybe business relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, and just a connection with the community they're in. And then they stay for long periods of time. And especially because they maybe develop obligations. Maybe they have children in China, or maybe they set up a business. There's so much potential. Obviously it's a big market, so people can just consider what they're trying to really accomplish with their careers, with their personal development. And there's a good chance that unless your career and personal development goals are highly fixed to the American or Western context, there's a pretty good chance that you can get it done, maybe even faster, and maybe with a higher standard of living in China.
Wow, that's incredible. It's a really cool journey, but knowing people that have done it, they also share some of the hard things, missing family, not being able to see friends. How can they navigate some of those issues while they go on this adventure?
So missing family, friends, missing food. And let's face it, we all know that China is a rapidly developing country, so there's air pollution problems. Right. A lot of people complain about that. And of course, it's also a typical characteristic of a developing market is that a lot of the industry players tend to have flexible morals, flexible business ethics. Well, fortunately, that's one reason why I started the company, is I wanted to solve that problem.
Okay.
So we only work with institutions that know the policies, respect their relationship with their employees, and so we can actually solve that problem. But beyond that, it's just a big challenge sometimes. There is some cultural barrier, even though we mentioned that people are the same fundamentally, especially in some parts of the country, because let's face it, it was an agrarian country until about 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And many people have a very agrarian mindset. They're not very open-minded about some things, or as a foreigner in China, maybe you would feel a lot of attention. People would recognize you. Obviously, you would stand out. It's not like you're in a pluralistic society like America, where if I see somebody who's ethnically Chinese on the street, I don't take one moment to think about their background.
Right.
To me, they're here. They're in America. That's all that matters. But in China, obviously, that's different. If you stand out, you stand out, and especially in smaller towns, and that kind of gets tiresome for foreigners as well. But I think the point is just to understand the reality of the situation. You're in a different country. People are going to be curious about that. You're going to miss your family. Make a good plan. Save money so you can go back and visit your family. Make sure that you're prepared with regard to the internet. Make sure you have the right software so that you can regularly communicate with your family. I mean, let's face it, you and I are having this conversation. We're probably almost 1,000 miles from one another.
Right.
And it's totally easy to do that. And whether it's Skype or WeChat, which is the Chinese version of Skype, Facebook, and all combined. It's all about making sure your family gets the right software. I did that for my family when I left. I had them all download WeChat. And so when I was in China, I take pictures, I take videos, I send them voice messages. It's no different. My family lives right now about a 2-hour drive from me. Okay. And when I'm on a business trip in China, how could it be? It's not any different. I still see them once every couple of months. Right. I don't, or maybe once every month. I don't, it's not like I have to, just because we're on the other side of the world. The only challenge is the time zone difference. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that completely makes sense. Get that for sure. It's about creating solutions to navigate some of those issues. You are helping people live, work, and study, whether it's in the States or in China from another culture. What are some of the other roles that you can help connect them with? Maybe they're teaching English, maybe they're being a student, but what does that look like? How can you help place them?
Okay, well, about 80% of what we do in the recruiting business, as far as sending people to China, is ESL, is English as a second language. However, there is a big need for subject teachers, especially sciences and mathematics. So if you have an engineering background, or if you have a mathematics background, even just a bachelor's degree, you could do very, very well in China as a mathematics teacher, as long as you could handle teaching, calculus and such. But no, I mean, it's really excellent. I've sent many people to some of the top high schools in China where they're there teaching mathematics and English, and that's been pretty rewarding for them. But outside of the education sector, as an employee, we also have relationships with a few universities in China, which offer really generous scholarships. So let's say you don't have a bachelor's degree, right, and you want to go to China. Maybe you just want to get a bachelor's degree. You don't care where you go, but it's too damn expensive, right? Here in America. Well, you can get to China and get a bachelor's degree for free or close to it.
Wow.
Obviously, there's some initial upfront costs, but over a 4-year period, you'll pay far less than even one semester's price just to get your whole degree there. And you can work on the side. You can obviously meet many great people. And depending on your major, if you study computer science, obviously, which is really, really easy to get into in China, you just go there. You can contact us, or you can do some Google searching yourself. You could basically spend 4 years in China and spend very little money, or maybe even earn money. And then once you're done, you have a computer science degree and you can easily earn 50, 60 grand a year in your first job, right? That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to study business, we have relationships with universities in the capital city of the wealthiest province in China. That's Nanjing, the capital of Jiangsu province. So imagine getting your MBA from that environment in today's global context. Obviously, it's a really great opportunity. So we do that as well. Regarding other industries, we're working on it. I've only been doing this for a few years, and we do have a lot of connections with IT companies, companies that are looking for people's help in the hospitality industry.
Right.
But I guess to summarize, it's a huge job market. There's a lot of competition for jobs, and if you wanted to do a job that any Chinese person could do, I'm pretty sure they'll do it for cheaper.
Yeah.
So therefore, those jobs are just really not available.
Right.
So most of the jobs are either in education or they're related to the outside world. So they're jobs that require that your background as an American or a Canadian or a Brit will allow you to help them develop their company or their services internationally. There's many roles like that, whether it's management, marketing, sales. So that's definitely a potential. And then the last thing I want to say about that is entrepreneurship is really, it's very challenging wherever you're at, but it's a real big potential in China.
Okay. Why
so
is
obviously
that?
I chose, because the people in China and the government want to develop.
Okay.
And obviously they're an export-oriented economy. So they're looking to sell their goods abroad. So, and they're looking to invest abroad, to hedge, on certain futures. The Chinese people are very conservative, if I may characterize them in a blanket statement like that. And so, they made a lot of money during the bull years. They've had a bull market for 30 years.
Wow.
Really.
Yeah.
Right. So, there's a ton of rich people, and all you have to do is be in the right place at the right time. And that's many people. So there's still a lot of poor people in China, but there's a lot of wealthy people, and they're looking to hedge. They want to invest in businesses abroad. They want to do business abroad. And if you are savvy and you're hardworking and you find a niche, I know many people who go to China and they initially teach English, or they initially just go there traveling. And they stay and they find a way to make money. They find a way to do a business, whether that's creating a media channel or something like that. There's many, many opportunities for people. And we can't necessarily, provide opportunities like that, but we're definitely willing to point you in the right direction. And again, that's why I created the podcast. It's sort of to bring those stories out into the open so everyone can hear how it's done, that it's possible, and to inspire those individuals who might be inclined in that direction.
So tell us a little bit about the podcast. You just mentioned it. You're interviewing people. What's the format? What are the kind of stories that they're going to hear? And maybe what's one of your favorite stories that you've heard so far as a podcast host?
Okay, well, the podcast is fairly new. I started it in January, and we actually had a very busy year. So I've been pretty inconsistent with my delivery, the weekly delivery, which was the initial goal. But my goal is to get more people on. It's, with people being on the other side of the world, the bandwidth issues, it's sometimes hard to have proper interviews over the internet.
Right.
But generally, we're trying to get people on who have an interesting story, who can help the audience understand Chinese people, understand the Chinese market, understand how foreigners do well in China, how they did it, what are the options. Currently, we're still in the first stage, if you will, of the podcast. So most of the episodes are solo, me talking about the nuts and bolts of how to go to China, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what to look out for, both in terms of opportunity and potential pitfalls. So I'm sort of in that stage right now, but I'm guessing moving forward, we're going to have more people on who have interesting stories. And I sent you the podcast episode that I thought was most interesting.
Yeah.
I have a business partner who's he's a Canadian citizen, but he was born in China and now he lives in China again. And we really just we broke down the patterns of migration of Chinese people into America or Canada. And I think that, again, I mentioned earlier, everyone who lives in a major city, whether you're in Chicago, whether you're in Philadelphia or New York or wherever, there's more and more Chinese immigrants. It's just a thing, or they're expats, they're international students. That their stories are important to our lives. They're affecting our culture and our society. And the better we understand their story, maybe the better equipped we'll be to provide value to them and for them to provide value for us in the future. Mm-hmm.
That's really, really important to know. You are really helping people at various levels. You're helping them learn about what it means to live abroad, specifically in Asia. You're also helping people do it. How can people really take the next steps? If they're listening to this episode right now and they're going, this sounds great, but I just don't know if it's for me, or I don't know what the next steps are to start this journey. Maybe they're a college student and they're saying, hey, I'm wrapping up in a year and I don't know what I'm doing after college. I can't find a career. I don't know what that looks like. Or maybe the person listening saying, hey, I'm kind of feeling stuck in my life and I really want to do something that shakes it up, that gives me new experiences and allows me to see the world. What do they need to be doing to prepare themselves to make that transition? And how can they, if they're working with you, how do you help them in that process of getting them from, concept of going and teaching abroad or being abroad to actually doing it?
Okay, well, that's a good question. As I mentioned earlier, anyone is welcome to contact us at any point in time. If I'm not available, another member of the staff will be available to answer some of the questions you might have. But as you would imagine, going to the other side of the world is not that easy. It's not like getting in your car and driving over a state line.
Right.
You do need to prepare some things. And so on our website, opportunityinchina.com/FAQ is our frequently asked questions page. We answer all the questions related to the requirements and the step-by-step process by which you need to follow in order to obtain a work permit to go to China. It's pretty involved, for sure. And so it's good to do a little bit of digging first so that you can conceptualize which stage you're at and how to get to the next stage. And then generally speaking, just, do more research. It's a big country. Imagine moving to a place like America from a different country. Where do you go? There's so many places.
Yeah.
And of course, our podcast can be a resource. We also have a YouTube channel. And there's other YouTube channels. There's a ton of them with thousands of videos. Take some time, think about what you want, make sure it's the right choice for you so that, you're going to go there and you're going to have a satisfying experience. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that people should kind of scout out locations? You talk about doing the research and figuring out maybe where they want to land. Should they go visit the place before they choose to engage with this lifestyle for a year or 2 years? Or do you think it's just better to sometimes make the leap?
That's a good question. I did that. The first thing, I went there first because I knew I was not just going there to work. I knew that I would be I'd be involved with China for the rest of my life if I made the decision to really move there. And so before I finished my university, I actually spent 2 months there over the summer. Okay. I just traveled by myself all over the country. And it was a good experience. It definitely gave me the confidence that I was making the right choice. Of course, that's expensive. I found a way to finagle my university into paying for it. So it wasn't expensive to me. But anyway, you get my point. If the person can, living in China is not too expensive if you're smart about it. We have episodes, again, we're on the nuts and bolts stage of our podcast. We have episodes about how to save money in China. So if you listen to that or do more research, you can actually live in China while traveling for $1,000 a month. Like that would be living well. So if you have some money and you want to make sure it's the right choice, go there. If not, spend time talking to people. Talk to us. Talk to other people who might be in China, find a way to get connected and ask your questions. And as far as like scouting it out, the location, everyone has their own preferences. Basically there are different, city sizes, locations, climates. Just do a little research, sit back, watch some YouTube, or again, you're welcome to connect with us. And even if you don't want to talk to us, if you get WeChat, and you connect with a member of our team, we'll put you in some WeChat groups, some social media groups where you can ask your questions there, or go on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We operate several Facebook groups. Ask your questions there and meet friends, and you'll get a clearer understanding after you've talked to a variety of people.
I think that it's really cool what you're doing. You just mentioned you have a couple of Facebook groups. You have your website, which is opportunityinchina.com. You have the YouTube channel. What's the YouTube channel account name? Is that Opportunity for China also?
Opportunity in China, yes. Yep.
And
should be easy to find.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll make sure to include all those links in the episode notes so that they're easy to find. In a moment, we'll be back with MC Miller and our rapid fire questions. If you're enjoying today's episode, which I hope you are, here are a few other episodes you may want to check out. In Season 2, Episode 48, our guest is Phil Rosenthal. He is the star of Somebody Feed Phil, which is on Netflix. He's also the creator of Everybody Loves Raymond. In Season 1, Episode 83, our guest was Eric Severson. He is an adventure seeker. He has traveled to over 80 countries around the world. And he's lived in places like France, Japan, Thailand, French Guiana, Washington State, Virginia, Alaska, and California. He's traveled across 6 continents on the back of a motorcycle. He summited the highest mountains in 8 countries and 5 states. He is an adventurer to the max. Super fun episode as we talk about travel and so much more. These are just 2 of over 160 episodes now, and I want to encourage you, go back and check out some of those past episodes. The guests are incredible, and I think they'll really encourage you, challenge you to go chase your big ideas and dreams and change the world around you. Now let's jump into our rapid fire questions with MC Miller. We are back with MC Miller to do rapid fire questions. Our first question that we always ask is, what is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or a dream and they don't know where to start?
Well, you want to have control over your life.
Okay.
You want to make sure that you know how to get things done in your life. And if you have a goal, you have a dream, but you don't have control over your environment, over your circumstances, then you're not going to be able to obtain that goal anyway. So in order to have control, you need to have awareness. You need to have organization. So get yourself organized. And then you think about your goals. And then once you're well organized, you'll know how to arrange your time every single day, how to arrange your studying and researching, how to arrange your networking in order to navigate toward your goal. Mm-hmm.
Now, you have a perspective that's a global perspective. I think many in the United States don't have. What's one change you'd like to see in the world?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I know it's rapid fire. Let me think. I wish people were just more civil to each other. I mean, we know that as Americans, it's very divisive right now in this country. You say one thing and you have someone breathing down your neck or shouting you down on Facebook or shouting you down face to face, right?
Yeah.
And that stuff has to stop.
Yeah.
That's totally unacceptable behavior. Yeah, we have different opinions. That's what makes us a pluralistic society. So I wish people would just focus on being civil. It's important.
Yeah, I think that celebrating diversity and really having compassion for others is so significant and missed right now. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah, you said it in a lot better way than I did.
You are building something that really has substance to it. It is something filled with purpose and is making an impact on many people's lives. What do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I have a 4-month-old daughter.
Okay.
And my wife and my daughter are out shopping right now. They're going to come home. We're going to have a meal together. We're probably going to have more children. I want my family to be well educated, not only in the traditional sense of going to school, but I want them to have a very clear understanding of their roles in society. And I want them to value themselves. I want to be a good example for them. Because I cannot achieve all my goals. Many of my goals are way too ambitious. Yeah. And so at the very least, I hope my legacy is that my daughter, or if I have more children, that they learn something from my diligence and my discipline, and they apply that to their life. And that would be enough for me.
Where do you find inspiration?
Well, where do I find inspiration? I don't know. I was just born inspired, I guess. I was homeschooled, by the way.
All right.
And so I had to, well, for part of my education, there was a stint where I did go to the public school. And so I had to become, I guess you'd call it, an autodidact. I'd had to learn how to learn how to study by myself. And I guess I was fortunate that I just liked it. I liked going to the library. I liked reading and I liked learning. And learning's inspiring. I mean, my biggest distraction in life is I like learning. I could spend hours and hours and accidentally found that I've been reading the whole day when I had other more important things to do.
Right.
And so I'm inspired by knowledge. I'm inspired by human connection. I'm inspired by our, just by our ability as human beings to get so many things done, to accomplish anything. I feel I can accomplish anything if I put my mind to it, within reason, of course. And that inspires me. Just my capacity as a human being. That's enough. We've been gifted. We've been created in a way where we have a lot of power, and if we use that power for good things, then that's inspiring in and of itself.
Love that. What is one book you think every dreamer or entrepreneur should read, and why?
One book any dreamer or entrepreneur should read. I just got finished reading Perry Marshall's 80-20 rule for like the fifth time. I like that book. 80-20 for Sales and Marketing, I think, is the actual title of the book.
Okay.
I'm going to go with that one because that's the one I liked reading most recently. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. How do you define success?
Success is about staying true to yourself, because we all have goals and they change from time to time, but you're only successful when you accept who you are and you don't let anything in life sort of change your fundamental core principles, whether those are ethical and moral principles, faith-based principles, or just the things you want to accomplish in the way you see yourself, because nobody knows you better than you know yourself. And so it's important that you're honest and, and straightforward, especially with the people you know, love, and trust. So I think, that's about it.
What is one habit you find helpful in your life as an entrepreneur?
One habit: to-do lists.
Okay.
And I don't mean just random like things on a piece of paper. There was a great book, going back to books. What was it? I forget the writer, but it was called Getting Things Done. I'm sure everyone who listens to your podcast regularly probably knows this book. I think the surname is Allen, the guy who wrote it. I think his last name is Allen. Anyway, he has this idea that it's not just about creating a list. It's about getting those ideas out of your head, because I think most of the people listening to your podcast, they're in the business space, they're in the entrepreneurial space. They're doing challenging, complex tasks, which are not represented on a flow chart, right? Yeah. It's all in their head, most of it. That's what I mentioned earlier. I need to delegate because everything's in my head, but no one else really has access to it unless I write it down. Yeah. And so I find that writing down my daily goals, weekly goals, and like quarterly, annual goals, and making them in such a manner that they're accessible. I know I will look at my to-do list, every day. I'll look at it. I look at it before I go to bed. I look at it when I wake up. It's all about making sure that you know what your tasks are and you're prioritizing well, and you're not being distracted by, not knowing what next step is, Be organized. Remember, we talked about it just a moment ago. Right. I think having control over your life starts with being organized. So
that's so good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't remember who it was that said it exactly, but someone said an idea isn't attainable until you write it down. And I think that's a powerful thought, that there's something magical, not magical necessarily, but there's something in that step of moving it from the head to paper that starts to make it attainable. And that process is really powerful. I know James Altucher talks about that. He does lists of 10 every day, 10 ideas, 10 concepts, 10 things, ways to solve problems he's facing. And I just think that's a powerful thing. I think that's such a great habit and a way to really move yourself forward. Just that simple list idea. It's powerful.
Yes, agreed.
Now you do a lot. You are working with different time zones, so your day looks very different than most of our guests' days. How do you start and finish your day?
Well, it really depends. I kind of had the bad habit of just burning the midnight oil until I can't keep my eyelids open anymore. But I do tend to wake up the same time every day, which I think most people would agree that that's the most important thing, is making sure you're up, make sure you have the routine. The starting routine is very important. So I wake up at about 6:30 a.m., sometimes 7 if I have trouble getting out of bed, 6:30 or 7 every day. Get up, I have my tea and coffee. I do a few, morning routines just to get myself moving. I take a little walk, and I come back inside and I immediately look at that list I mentioned. And then I look at my Google Calendar and I make sure everything is congruent, and I add things to the calendar. I make sure I know from about 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. I know exactly what I'm doing every single day. And then I usually take a break between like 7 or 8 p.m. until about midnight. And then I go back to work for a few hours because I have to work on China time. And then right before I go to sleep, I look over again. I actually populate that to-do list so it's ready for me in the morning. It's all about being organized, especially for us entrepreneurs. If we don't know what we're doing, then we're kind of running in 1,000 different directions, and that is not going to be conducive to our success. Mm-hmm.
I know that's what it is for me. The same kind of thing that if you're not organized, the day just gets away, the tasks get away, and your day just becomes a non-successful day. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I would probably be living in DC, working for a law firm. Probably, I would probably be forced to wear my robot clothes every day, shirt and tie, and who knows? That's probably what I would be doing. And that's not necessarily a bad life. I think it suits my personality to some extent. It's just not at this point in my life, it's not something I would want to do. So I'm glad that I'm the master of my own time. I can do my own thing. I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I've been granted to sort of, escape the potential of being, a slave to the partners of a law firm. Yeah.
What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Well, dreams, man. I'm actually happy. I'm very satisfied with what I'm doing. Do I have more dreams? Just more of what I'm doing. Just. I have a friend. I'll answer the question quickly by saying I have this friend who always made a joke. He said, "Your life, to your mind, Michael, your life is like it's like a video game. When you every time you do something, you're just leveling up, right? You're increasing your level, but you're the same person, right? So I want to keep doing what I'm doing, and I don't know where life is going to take me, but I'll be like water. I'll roll downhill and take the path of least resistance, maintaining my form. But I don't know if I'm going to be doing the same thing 10 or 20 years from now, but I don't really have any dreams that I haven't already fulfilled.
Super cool. As we wrap up today's episode, I always like to leave our guest have the final thought. So what is your final thought for us today?
Okay. Well, I've actually never been a guest on a podcast before where we're sort of talking more about these more fundamental things about life and business and personal development. So it's kind of an interesting experience for me. And the thought I want to leave is that, we all have a legacy that we want to leave. We all have a life that we want to live in the present. And I think the important thing is just to be very conscious of what you want, whether staying in your hometown, working for your parents' business, or whether going abroad to challenge your perception and to advance your career in that direction, or taking a typical corporate path, getting a BA, then an MS, and finding yourself in the corporate world. There's nothing wrong with any path as long as you are being a moral actor in society and you're being true and honest to yourself. So, and it takes all sorts in the world to make a diverse and prosperous economy. So, that's it.
Thank you so much for taking time out, sharing your story, sharing what you're doing, and how you can help so many more people who have a broader vision to do things an untraditional way and have experiences that will last a lifetime.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone who's listening.
Once again, we want to thank today's guest, MC Miller, for taking time out, sharing his story, and insights into the world of teaching and studying abroad. If you want to learn more about opportunity in China or MC Miller, make sure you check the episode notes where you can find links to MC's website, their podcast, and so much more. Our guest on Monday's episode is John McGarvey. John is a Minneapolis-based entrepreneur and seasoned executive in the natural food industry. Most recently, John co-founded Dao Labs, a supplement and lifestyle company. Dao Labs is changing the way Western consumers approach health by embracing the 2,500-year-old formula and practices of Chinese medicines in sustainable, easy-to-understand formulas. We are so excited to have John on the podcast, so make sure to check out Monday's episode with John McGarvey. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. Now get out there and chase those dreams. Make a step, a small step, a big step, but any step to turn those dreams and ideas from an idea and into reality. So dream big and change the world around you.
Vous verrez comment un simple disque peut aller plus loin que vous ne l'auriez imaginé. Mettez-vous dans une tenue légère. Ôtez tout ce qui peut vous gêner ou tirer votre attention. Cherchez la meilleure position. Les bras et les jambes légèrement espacés. Étirez-vous doucement, mais complètement. En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.